Hello and welcome to, I guess, what I'm going to call Historical Archives. I am your host, Coach Winuvas, the commissioner and one of the leadership team here in WFL. And today is something I want to talk about a little bit that I want to get back to doing. I mentioned it briefly in the episode where I talked about why Chiefman's Corner got his name. If you're interested in that one, take a look at the link down below in the description. But Adam Chiefman was one of my pseudonyms that I did when I wrote content, and obviously when I started doing the podcast back in 2009. I also, after I moved off of Kansas City, like I talked about in the Chiefman's Corner video, I moved to Tampa Bay, and I created Antoine Buckman, who just sounded like a really cool dude, and it's such a great name that I was just like, I have to keep it. I kept Tampa through Madden 11, and that's important because in Madden 11, I actually did a lot of heavy lifting for the league and content generation that I was part of, the WFL, and I actually created a draft board because back in Madden 11 and even upwards to Madden, actually maybe after Madden 12, they started random draft generation or partial random draft generation. But anyway, what I did is what guys could do is they could do an offline franchise, and basically the way Madden 11 had their draft classes was everybody got the same draft class every year. So whether it was offline or online, you knew year one you were getting these players, year two you were getting these players, year three you were getting these players. So we had heard that guys were basically fast-forwarding franchises a couple years, getting notes on all the players that were good in that draft class, because some of them obviously would be ranked lower in draft status, kind of like what we have here with sleepers. But people would just go draft those A potential players in like round one that were projected 7th round, and we were like, what the heck? How did you know? Well, then we realized and found out, they kind of gamed the system. I'm not going to say they cheated. They took advantage of the system. The system was broken at that point, and so they took advantage of it. And you know what? I can't fault them for that. But we wanted to create some even ground, and so it was kind of tasked to me, and I took it upon myself a little bit. So it was kind of a little bit of both. Once I started, my cousin was like, yeah, can you roll with that and make it as big as possible? I was like, yeah, I can. And boy, howdy did I. I basically created a draft spreadsheet that listed every single attribute, because obviously I took and went offline on Madden 11, fast forwarded like everybody else was doing, but instead of just keeping the notes for myself, I actually made a note of what every single rating was, what potential people were, because it was at that point it was rated A, B, C, D, or F. That's all you had. And then I wrote down, I basically made a notation of every single rating. I did it position by position, so all the quarterbacks were in one tab of a spreadsheet, halfbacks on one tab, so on and so forth. And it was probably about 220 players. It was a good bit of players. So I took that and I basically created a spreadsheet, and I essentially shared the spreadsheet with the entire league. If you played Madden 11, you may remember there was a draft with a quarterback named Jamarcus Austin. I still remember the guy's name to this day. The Jamarcus Austin draft was the first draft I did that for. And essentially what I did is I created this big old huge spreadsheet. And because I was Tampa Bay at the time, I came up with a super creative name. Buckman's Big Board, the BBB. Because I was Antoine Buckman's was my pseudonym at the time, and it's a big board like Mel Kiper's big board, and that's what I was tailoring after was Mel Kiper's big board. And to go a step further, because I had the time, like I said, back in those days, I actually did a Mel Kiper S-type draft book where basically I wrote a snippet like Kiper would do with blurbs about how these guys play their 40 times and or not 40 times, but how they look on tape and things of that nature. I even made up stats based on what school they went to, and I made up records, and essentially I basically built out little biographies for every single player. I so wish I had that to show how nerdy I was still. I don't have that sheet anymore, but I know it was about 80 pages worth of information. It was ridiculous and stupid and over the top, but everybody loved it to death. It was a great content fill for the league. Now, I didn't do that bit anymore, the 80-page biography stuff, but what I would do is I continued doing Buckman's Big Board, and I did it up until, actually I was doing it when I was a member of OMFL in Madden 22, or trying to. Very difficult to do in Madden 22. It was just tough. But anyway, side note. But I was doing Buckman's big boards. As long as I was playing Madden, I was doing Buckman's big board. And the way we started doing it is instead of it, once it went to a pseudo random draft class where it would be, a generated class of players and you never knew what class you were in. It was random which one you get. You'd get a certain draft class, but it was random. Like there was like 20 or 25 draft classes. You're going to get one of those 25, but it's not. This is guaranteed. This is guaranteed. This is guaranteed. It's randomized a bit. So what I did is with me and my cousin, and we got a couple of others, is essentially we would pool our scouting resources. So basically, we would scout these players. We would share the information to the board, to the Buckman's big board, and everybody that participated in sharing that information had access to the board. And my cousin and I would do a live draft show every year. Sorry, I actually will have a cut there because I had to stop and take care of something in real life. But anyway, my cousin and I would do a live draft show using that Buckman's big board, and we would generate those biography blurbs on the fly while we were talking about about the draft. And we used it mainly for content. Obviously, to be fair, we were trying to get a little bit of an upper hand on folks. Trying to get information and make sure we had as much information as possible. But the main reason we were doing it was honestly for a content standpoint, because I'll be honest with you, I usually draft like crap, even with a full draft board in front of me, and that's depressing because I was so engrossed in wanting to talk about, what players were being gotten, talk them up a little bit, just like you would see in a draft show, talk up people's drafts, talk up how good their draft was, how bad their draft was, things of that nature, that I really didn't focus so much on my own draft, which is the whole point of getting this spreadsheet, you would think. But I really, truly enjoyed doing the content more. I enjoyed doing those live draft shows, and I hope to, with a little help from some spreadsheet gurus and leadership and myself kind of working a little bit, I would love to get back to doing that type of content because I really, really I really think it adds a ton to have a live draft show. Is it long? Absolutely, it's long. We usually pencil in about 2.5 hours to get a draft show in, but it was always so much fun to see. We'd usually have upwards of 20 to 25 guys out of 32 listening live to the show while they're drafting, and then whenever they get to a certain point, we'd have usually about 5 to 6 guys volunteer to jump on the show live and talk about what they did, why they did what they did, why they're thinking about this, what they're thinking about with their next pick, things of that nature. So it was really like a really nice amalgamation of a whole lot of things that made it feel like a true real deal draft experience, and it was always so much fun. Since WFL got started, I have yet to really find a good co-host to consistently host it with me. The times whenever I was doing it for OMFL and grown folks, Nate was basically, my cousin Nate was the main guy, and I was kind of like his color commentator. I'd kind of pitch in some stuff and throw in where I could. Here I'm the main guy, and I'm also the color guy, so it's kind of tough to keep track of everything. But I hope to get back to something like that. I really enjoy the live draft show. I think it adds an element to a league that just cannot be matched by anything out there. The only other thing that really matches is when people can do live broadcast of games as they're happening, which for me would be super tough to do because I kind of have to schedule these around the missus because, I'm married and I would like to stay that way. And the missus is not a huge fan of Madden, so getting the time to play Madden in and of itself can be a chore sometimes. Getting the time to do these videos can be a chore to do sometimes. So I try to do it when she's either not here, she's occupied, or otherwise indisposed. The draft show, she used to be pretty understanding about the draft show. I haven't done one in a while, so we'd have to see how understanding she would be about it, because it'd be me essentially sitting where my TV, by the way, is like right over here. That's where the PlayStation is. So it'd be very difficult for me to do the show in a situation. I try to keep my back to this wall because it kind of gives a plain Jane background to look at. If I were to be on that side, away facing that direction where you'd see this wall behind me, there's not a wall. There's actually a big old window, and it's got mostly curtains, but light could seep in. There'd be lighting issues, things like that. This is kind of a nice controlled environment, but obviously the TV's behind me. Now I could use remote play, but that would eat into resources that would be needed for the live broadcast. So it'd be one of those things where I'd probably be like, talking to broadcasts, watching a stream, and then suddenly go, oh, it's my turn. Okay, let me turn back, like I just did there, turn back to the TV or pause the broadcast or something, turn my feed off or whatever to go ahead and make my pick. Anyway, Buckman's big board has always been something I've been pretty passionate about. I really love the draft. I think the draft is the best time of year because everybody's hopeful. Everybody's 0-0 at that point. You basically just have to make do with the draft picks you have or have acquired through some intelligent GMing or some dumb GMing like I did with Lamar Jackson, but that's another story for another day. That's real life WFL. I really want to get back to doing Buckman's big board. It's just a matter of finding the time and finding a way to deal with the way they do scouting now versus scouting in the past. In the past, obviously, you could get particular marks and attributes for certain players, and it was real easy to basically drop those attributes into a small section of a spreadsheet and be done with it. Now, obviously, for our purposes, that people that love scouting, it didn't give a whole lot of information, so it's kind of a catch-22. It was easier to fill out a Buckman's big board, but at the same time, it didn't really offer a ton of information. But what I used to do is just to kind of give you a little insight behind the curtain is I would actually, you know what I'll do? So what I'm going to do now, I did another cut because I was pulling up the information. I didn't want to pull it up while I was recording, so I kind of just, so if you see a sudden movement in jar, I'm sorry. I want to show you what it actually looks like, what Buckman's big board looked like in Madden 22. And I'm going to pull it up here, and this is the quarterback tab. And essentially what we do is we'd actually handwrite most of this. Well, the information we'd handwrite in would be the name, the school, the height, the weight, the age. I had pull down menus for what area they were projected to play in or what area they're projected to be picked in. And then I had scheme fit, which essentially if you pull down would be for this particular quarterback, for a particular position, I should say. You'd have the listings for what they could be. And as you found that out in Madden 22, you could plug it in. Then what we do is we'd also manually assign out the different acceleration, agility, and things of that nature. So like this player had decent solid acceleration, decent solid agility, the great elite COD, change of direction. So basically this guy looks like he'd have been a good running quarterback. So, and then obviously we had a list of all the different, spin, all the different values we had. This is obviously an unfinished board from Madden 22. I basically kind of stopped working on it once I left. This is actually, I think, the last one I did for OMFL before I left and started back WFL anyway. But we also had a listing for like combine times and then combine bench. So this is stuff we'd have to manually enter in the week that it's available, would be this combine stuff. We'd manually enter this information in. And then if they had a draft story, like if they had an article named after them or talked about them in the during the regular season, we'd put that in as well. And for this one, just to kind of give you a little enlightenment, Ross was one of the guys that helped with this board in OMFL, one of our leadership team, the Dolphins owner, and he would actually create pictures. He'd pull NCAA 14 out, I believe is how he did it. He'd pull NCAA 14, and he'd basically get a screenshot of the player's position and the school he's going to based on what it says in Madden. He'd pull a screenshot, he'd get a screenshot of a guy, and then he'd basically make a little blog or profile about him. It was really cool, and that's the kind of thing I think makes a league really, really cool, is those kind of things. For example, all these different things here, the BASQ, the accuracy, all that is just some gibberish that basically takes an amalgamation of these things, these attributes, and basically turns them into a number. So it's like advanced analytics, if you will. And we did that, just to kind of flip through, we did it for every single position. So obviously you can see I got tired apparently at some point. We did not fill in wide receivers or tight ends. So this board is not finished, obviously, but it doesn't matter. It's from Madden 22 anyway. But you can see, like, we have offensive tackles, offensive guards. And as we would get information on these players, we dot them in and we have color coordination. So if this guy had a C, boom, he's a C. He gets a blue tick here in a minute, as it takes a little while to load up that particular color scheme. There's a lot going on this board. It's something that I would, this is a spreadsheet I designed that definitely would need some some tender loving care. There's a lot of formulas at work that kind of drag it down. And then obviously the big one, the big board itself would actually organize players by these analytics that we created and essentially give you a mock draft board based on that. Now, obviously, some guys would be out of place, like the top. Oh, no, this isn't the top player. Top player listed here is Alex Nance, and then Cody Mills, and then Jonathan Skaggs. And this is obviously dependent on having the information in the system. There's no wide receivers or anything like that. There's not a lot. So you can see down here, wide receivers, tight ends are open. Then you see some more tackles. And it basically creates like a pseudo list of everybody that should be drafted when they're drafted. So it's something we made up. Like, or I say we, I made up the BSQ and the BASQ, or no, the BSQ and the BAQ. I made these two up. Essentially, I believe it's Buckman's athletic quotient and Buckman's skill quotient is what it's called. And that's the addition of the two together. And simply put, if you care, which I'm going to enlighten you because I think it's interesting, and if you're bored at this point, you can skip ahead. I'm sorry. But essentially the athletic quotient, the BAQ, was simply taking these and assigning a number value to them, with poor marginal being the worst, great elite being the best, and basically adding them all together and dividing them by adding them all together and dividing them by a certain number, I believe. Is that the way it worked? No, we just assigned the number out. Yeah, we just assigned the number out and basically just did an addition of everything. Just added it all together. So the better you were at these attributes, obviously the higher your athletic quotient score would be. And then for the skills, it was simply we took and we assigned number values to letters. And if we didn't have the letters in place, we basically assigned it a grade value of in between everything. So basically C level. So if we didn't have a grade, we had C level, which is where, as I scroll back over, that was the skills quotient, was basically that. So basically, if we didn't have a value, we rated it at what we call, I believe it was 2.5, because that's halfway between 5 and 1. So that was essentially our rating scale, was 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And if you didn't have a rating, it was 2.5. So it wasn't quite a C, but it wasn't quite a D either. And that's how we got the skills quotient. And then this was simply counting out how many numbers we actually had versus how many we're supposed to have and getting an accuracy rating. So you can see 13.33%. If I add in, say, I put in an A here, once it filters across, you can see it jumps to 20%. So basically, as we add more values in, this number, the skills quotient, can go up or down, and this number will go up in accuracy to show how accurate we are. So basically, it means we're getting this player fully scouted. And so this kind of gives us a little bit of play, and this BASQ is an addition of this and this. And essentially, oh, I didn't want to do that. Back. Put that back. Thank you. Basically, that's an addition of these two, and that's kind of like our pseudo ranking for that player, how good or bad they are overall or at that position. And so that kind of provides us a little bit of analytics. It adds a little bit of extra content, and I'm going to turn that back off for now. Sorry. I get nerdy around spreadsheets. I'm sorry. That's why you have so many spreadsheets to look at. But that's something I really would like to get back to, not necessarily for any sort of advantage standpoint of being able to draft properly, because again, if you've seen me draft, even with those draft boards, because I'm talking and doing content stuff, I'm usually not halfway paying attention to what's going on. So when it becomes my turn to pick, I'm usually picking whatever I see that I think I remember off the draft board. And usually I'm wrong. So I definitely don't do it for any sort of advantage personally. But I would love to get back to a point where we're doing that draft board either as a league, so that way everybody has information access, or having a couple of group of folks help me out with it and basically have access to that content as kind of being a Buckman insider, so to speak. But I would love to get back to that because, again, it makes for great content for the draft. It makes a live draft broadcast possible because essentially I can take a look at those values, take a look at those players, and instantly kind of make something up about them on the fly that could be semi-believable and sound like something that would be part of a draft podcast. You know, for example, going back to I got to bring it back up on screen. Sorry, you're going to have to look at the spreadsheet one more time. There we go. All right, so like, for example, this quarterback here, let me get on come on, there we go. All right, so for example, you know, we have this guy here, Jonathan Florence. He doesn't rate terribly high as far as the BASQ scale. 6 foot 233, decent solid, great elite change of direction, great elite throw power, decent solid speed. So this guy looks to me like an improviser. somebody that would be somebody like a West Coast style quarterback coming out of USF. Potentially, you could make up something about USF if he ends up being a top 5 selection, because that's what he's projected. You can make up something along the lines, or Jonathan Florence led USF to a 10-1 record over the regular season, led his team to a playoff spot. Unfortunately, they lost in the playoff to Clemson, and lost big. But it wasn't because of Florence. Florence had, threw for 300 plus yards, 4 touchdowns, 2 picks, unfortunately, because that defense of Clemson was just all over the place. A guy that's not going to outrun you, is not going to out hustle you as far as on a 40 time, but a guy that has just enough wiggle to make somebody miss, can be dangerous in the open field. If he's not terribly athletic in the open field, he can be dangerous in the open field. And definitely watch him on play action, watch him on rollout, because that movement and that ability to change direction quickly, combined with his elite level arm talent, that he can make every single throw on the board. Picture somebody maybe like a Patrick Mahomes style player coming into the league right out the gate. A guy that not necessarily a runner, not necessarily somebody that's going to light the world on fire, but somebody that definitely would be somebody you'd want to make sure you contain, because if he gets out of the pocket and gets moving, that arm, he could throw it anywhere on the field. And boom, you have something made up. All of that was just made up based on what I saw on the board there. So you can see how I kind of develop and do things on the fly there, and I'd love to do it on a grand scale. I like doing that kind of content. Like I said, I love doing draft shows. I need to really round this up, because we've gone quite a long time now. I just looked at the time on it. I did not mean for Buckman's Big Board to be the longest broadcast of the historical archives, but it is, because I love it and I love the draft. So I hope we can get back. I hope I can get back to having the time to get this information together and get it compiled and get it ready to go. Maybe not for this upcoming draft, mainly because I'm worried the draft glitch is going to eat us. But for future drafts, if we don't have the draft glitch, or if it's fixed, hopefully EA fix it. I would love to do live draft shows again and have that content available and enjoy that content, because the main reason I didn't do it in Madden 22, draft glitch. The first time I loaded up and tried it, we draft glitched, and guess what? I was prepared to do a 3-hour broadcast and did 20 minutes, and I was pissed about it, because I had set up the draft. I had done some little bit of work, not much, because I didn't have any draft class information for that, but it was just frustrating from a standpoint of, you prepare to do a draft show, you prefer to kind of be able to riff and go on the fly and talk to guys about their stuff, and the game just craps all over you, and it was quite disappointing. That's kind of why I haven't done it much yet. If they fix the draft glitch though, and I see it's fixed, I'll probably devote more resources and time into doing that Buckman's Big Board. So really, the hope that I do it again is going to rest on EA's shoulders for fixing things that make it doable for me to actually watch a draft, and not have to worry about it resetting and rewinding back to the draft again, and all that stuff that we've heard horror stories about and seen happen to other franchises. I hope it doesn't happen to us, because I would love to bring Buckman's Big Board back, if in just a small capacity with a few members helping out. But ultimately, what would be really ideal and nice and cool would be if the entire league pitched in and helped with, providing us information on the content, and then basically everybody could share in the wealth. Obviously, that would mean everybody wouldn't have those sneaky draft surprises and stuff. But then it becomes a game of chicken. Is this guy going to take this guy, or is he going to take this guy? I need to jump ahead and get him. It can still provide some drama and some entertainment value, even if everybody knows all the answers beforehand. And even still knowing all the answers, you could still pick a dud. I mean, it still could happen. Even if you pick a guy that looks good on paper, he could still be a dud, just like in real life, which is cool. Again, in case you're wondering, I love the draft. I love spreadsheets. I miss Buckman's Big Board. And hopefully that explains Buckman's Big Board and why I want to get back to it in the near future. Guys, I am Coach Winuvas, one of the leadership team and the commissioner here in the WFL. Appreciate your time watching this video. Hopefully you check out all the other videos in the Historical Archive series, I guess is what I'm going to call it. If you do, leave me some feedback. Let me know what other types of things you might want to be interested in knowing about from a historical standpoint. If I can provide them, I will. If not, I will at least try and do some research on it and see if I can find out what it entails. But I covered the big 3 that I wanted to cover and go over with you guys today. I appreciate your time again. I know I already said that, but I appreciate your time. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being a part of the WFL. Everything you do is appreciated, and without you, the WFL doesn't exist. Guys, I'm going to check you later.